Good evening. Can you hear me?
Good evening.
Good evening. How are you, Kevin?
Good evening.
Living the dream.
Hey, ma'am.
How you doing?
Excited to be here.
Me too.
This is the high. How pitiful am I when this is the highlight of my week?
Well, of course it is.
I look forward to this. Y'all just don't know how much I look forward to this every week. Yeah. Let me go ahead and share.
I have a special guest again.
Uh-oh.
He's a little fussy tonight.
Yeah.
They'll do that. I think I've just kind of spoiled rotten.
Yeah. And so let's go here and here. All right. Okay. I've got 5:59. There. All right. So who we got? I see Jamie's still connecting. Let's see, we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And Bianca's coming in. All right. And share screen.
And I'll give Shanda a call. I know she said she was laying down for a second, so I'll make sure she's
all right. Prayers for Tiffany. I think she sent me an email this afternoon that her sister-in-law has been hospitalized. Let me see if I've got, I don't want to misquote. Let's see. Her sister has been hospitalized, and so she won't be with us. So prayers for Tiffany and her sister. Hope things are okay there. So welcome back to Mels 603. Appreciate you joining us. This is the second of our 4 informational sessions. We will we'll do 2 more after tonight, and then we'll have our 4 case studies. So I'll just jump right in with a couple of housekeeping items here. If you'll notice, I sent an email. I hope you got it, but I also put it on our course overview page. I've updated our groups for case studies. Let me go ahead and talk about case studies for a minute. So here are the groups. They're on the front page. And so when you click on case study 1, what you'll find is it tells you what you should read. And it asks you just simply answer the questions. You can do a little PowerPoint. Don't do anything over the top. Don't spend a million years on your presentation. It's more get together, talk about the case after you've read chapters 6 and 8. Make sure that you address the 4 ethical paradigms that are on the lesson plan role of the principal. And let's see, do I have that? That role of the principal can be found under course content. It says the role of the principal, that's the one you're going to use. It has law for principal, and I'll go ahead and I'll give you a little cheat sheet. The most pertinent law is on this one, 115C 288, and then it has the ethics on there as well. And so you need to look at legally who grades and classifies pupils. And that's relevant to this case. But there's always, as always, there's a trick. So make sure that you read your chapters, that you look at your grading policy for your school and your school district. You look at the ethical paradigms, and you should be fine. And so that one is session 5. So sometime next week, you should, the first person in each group, so let me go back to that, will be the team leader for the first one, and then you'll rotate. So Pam, Yvonne, Alicia, and Kevin will send out an email to their cohort, and you'll do a Zoom session. Again, make sure that you've read the case and read the pertinent sections in your law book, and then do a Zoom session. I don't need to see a recording of the session. I don't need to see how the sausage is made. I just want to eat breakfast. So I'm interested in your presentation. I'm interested in your collaboration. And you'll do a presentation, and after your presentation, I urge you to wait until after your presentation. Then you'll write a reflective summary of either the process, the case, what your takeaway was from that. So for each of the case studies, you'll have a PowerPoint and you'll have a reflection. You write your reflection individually. Your takeaway might have been is my team worked really well and we got to the bottom of this really quickly, or my team was dysfunctional. We argued the whole time and couldn't come up with a consensus. Might be I didn't know about the law on who gives final grades. I didn't know that my district had a policy on grade breakdown in terms of what percentage everything counted. I didn't know that the state exams could only count up to 30%. Can't count less than 20, but more than up to 30, but not less than 20. I didn't realize that class assignments can only be 10% for the year. And you'll read the case. Teacher failed Bobby because he cheated on one class assignment, and she counted that class assignment more than half of his yearly grade and failed him. And so you pick it up from there. Is that legal? Is it ethical? What can the principal do? What should the principal do? What are the what's the background noise, the politics piece of it? So that's what we're looking at. Does anybody have any questions on how we do case studies? Nope, well, good. So tonight, we're going to try to hit a couple of different things tonight. We're going to hit our week 2 activity, which is personnel. And I've got some different documents here for you. And so we're going to start out by looking at the question that you were asked on the discussion board, which was interview an administrator concerning human resources practices. This should include position openings, job announcements, obtaining candidates, interviewing process, hiring process, all of those things from start to finish. And then it's different for every district. So you need to understand there is not one set way that is done. It's different from everyone. Also inquire about services such as employee assistance, compensation plans, and benefits. Finally, determine how position openings, job announcements, and obtaining your candidates is conducted in your district. So, kind of summarize it for me. So does anybody want to start out tonight and tell me what they found?
I could tell you a little bit about my school that I work at. I interviewed the principal, which was actually kind of funny because I interviewed him when he became an assistant principal. So we talked about it, we joked about it. So in our school, the principal gets information from the human resource person at the district office. So he'll send over some applications or applicants that have been cleared. And then the principal basically develops a team to interview. He says usually it's one person that's from the department and then another administrator. So they do the interviews as a team, and then once it's actually decided who they think is the best candidate, he does he calls references, and then once they've been cleared, he sends the name over to the district office, and then they do another clearance, and then the board has to approve the position.
All right, very good.
Yeah.
All right, so let's start from the beginning of what Yvonne just told us. They've got an opening. Well, how do you know if you've got an opening or not? Anybody? How do you know if you've got an opening?
Both my principal and my assistant principal said that our positions were based on our master schedule.
Right. Yes. What are you teaching? When I was a senior high principal, I got a call from, I'm trying to remember who it was, maybe an area superintendent, and said, can you go over to this local junior high and see what's wrong with their master schedule? And I was like, wait, what? Said, we can't, something's wrong with the master schedule and the personnel that they have, and they don't match. And they said, we know you've been a junior high, you've most recently been a junior high in the district. We know that you know how to use the software. This was prior to Power School, and prior to Sims, back when we used a one-off program called Socrates to schedule. And so, to Alicia's point, I went over to the junior high school, and the problem was they didn't have the correct personnel certification-wise to pull off the schedule that they were trying to mount. And so, when you start out with, do I have an opening? And I think it might have been Mallory, was it you that wrote in your response? You have to look at your allotment, the number that you get. Remember, you don't get money from the state for teachers, you get allotted positions. And then let me do a share right quick. Or no, I can pull this up. Y'all won't be able to see it. Who sent me this one that says the number of staffs based on the sections needed to fill the master schedule. So you got to, whether you have an opening or not starts with, do I have an allotment for that position? Did somebody leave? Am I gaining a position? So that's the first thing. Is there a position? You have to make sure HR says, yep. They look at your sheet and say, yes, you've got a position opening. That's the first thing. Second thing is master schedule. You can't just hire whoever you want. You've got to hire based on the allotment that fits your master schedule. When I went over to Albemarle Road, the problem was they had too many CTE teachers and not enough core teachers. They couldn't pull off their master schedule with what they had. They had enough teachers, they just didn't have the right ones. And so you got to make sure that your hiring matches the openings that you have based on what your master schedule says that you're offering. So that's the second piece. All right, so you establish that you have an opening. Every district does it differently. If it's a retirement, if it's a resignation, if it's a gained position, somebody left, how do you get the position? And then the first thing you look at before you set up any hiring committee is know what you need to hire. You need to make sure that you know what you got to hire or what you need to hire according to your schedule. So that's the second piece of that. Now, how do you get applicants? Say we've established we've got a position and we need an English teacher. All right, we've accomplished the first two steps. Where do we get English teachers from? Some districts you have to, and especially like in charter schools and some privates, you have to advertise yourself for these openings. But let's say that you're working in a large school district. You call up HR and say, I've got we've established my opening. We've established I need an English teacher. All right, I need an English teacher. Where does it go from there? What happens next? Does anybody can tell us what happens in their district? What happens next? When
our vacancies get posted on Teacher Match.
There you go. AppleTrack or Teacher Match or whatever. Why would we have to do that? Why can't we just call our cousin Sally?
Has to be fair and equitable opportunity for anybody to apply.
EEOC, Equal Opportunity Employment Commission, says it has to be equal opportunity for people to apply for the job. That is correct. We can't just call somebody we know. All right, now, so we called the district. They've hooked us in. They've got some applicants. All right, so They send over 10 resumes. Okay. They send 10 over. Who vets those 10 resumes to determine who's going to be interviewed? And who sets up the interview committee? Do you vet that 10, or do you interview all 10 of them? This may be the most important question I ask you tonight. So here's my argument. If you submitted your week 2 response, you notice that I said, who does the vetting of candidates and does the reference check? If that's a lot of work on the school to do that, if the district doesn't do it for you, I worked in districts that did it both ways. And here's what I would argue. If you send me over 10 and I've got to do the reference, I'm going to do what? The minimum or the maximum in terms of calling people in for interviews? I'm going to call 3 because that's what I'm required by law to do. If I know I'm going to have to do all the paperwork, call the references, and do all the background checks myself, I'm only going to call 3. Now, here is my thesis, my first thesis for the evening, and you can tell me if you agree or disagree or doesn't matter to you. I would submit to you that one of the problems that we have with diversity in schools is if I'm only going to get to hire 3, I'm going to take the safest 3. I'm going to take the 3 that look the most like what I think that candidate ought to look like. I'm not going to take a risk bringing a bunch of people in that might be a little bit outside the box or a little bit different, because I'm going to have to do all this work. That's how we get more of the same all the time. That's how everybody we hire looks the same, or their background is the same. Now, I can tell you, when I worked in a small rural district, we had to do all of our own. I never interviewed more than 3. When I was in Charlotte Meck, when they came to me already vetted, my employment analyst sent me 10 names. I interviewed all 10 of them. I found some people that I would have never hired if I'd had to do all the work because of their resumes. But when I brought them in, there was something about them. They were different. I was willing to look at more young people. And that, when you tend to only hire people with experience or that you don't have to do a lot of background work on. New people new to your district or new out of college, you got to do all these background checks. I was a lot more willing to take a risk on people and bring people in that were different than the norm, because I knew I wasn't going to have to do all this work on them. I wasn't willing to do that when I worked in a district where I had to do everything from A to Z. If you want your school to be different, if you want to bring in diversity that's different, whatever your definition of diversity is, you can't just keep hiring the same person over and over again. But if you have to do all the work on the hiring end, you tend to go with what you know. You tend to go the quickest route. You tend to take teachers who are, that have experience that they're transferring in. And then you wonder why you're monastic. Everybody's the same. You wonder why there's no diversity, why, we hadn't had an original idea in 10 years. Well, that's because you hire the same person over and over again, because you don't want to have to do all that background work. Principals are busy people. Now, you can bring people in, as Yvonne said, on your interview team, and you want to do that, somebody from their department, their grade level, you want to bring some people in. But guess who's got to do, because of confidentiality, guess who's got to do all that background work and reference checks? That would be you. You can't delegate that to other people. And so my perspective here is, and you can tell me if you agree or disagree, that if you want and you value difference, change, if you value young people and new ideas, if you value people from non-traditional roles, or you value diversity, I would argue that your district will make it really hard on you if they don't help you with the reference and vetting process of new candidates, because you will sink down to that level of, how many have I got to interview? 3. All right. Who are the 3 most likely suspects? And that 7 that you don't interview, there might have been a diamond in the rough in that group. There might have been a diamond in the rough in that group. Maybe the best teacher I ever hired was a new teacher out of college who everybody else passed on because, oh, we can hire, in high school, we can hire people with experience. And we won't have to do all this background work on them. Well, sometimes you miss good ones that way. So my point is hopefully you work in a district that gives you help and support on that. But I implore you, hiring is maybe the most important job that you do. Don't shortchange yourself and your school and your faculty and your community by only interviewing 3 people, because that's easier on you paperwork wise. Take the time and include as many people as possible in that process, if at all possible. All right. All right, let's talk about the interviewing process itself. So we've now got all of our applicants in. We've called, we've done if we had to, we've done our reference checks. We've set our committee. We've got our interview committee set up. We're doing it either virtually or we're doing it face-to-face in any way that we're doing it. A best practice is to have a list of questions to interview your candidates with. All right, what are the kinds of things that you cannot ask candidates?
Isn't it religious, political, and family?
Right.
Specific family.
Yeah. What about age? Can you ask people how old they are? No. Can you ask them who their parents are? No. Can you ask them about gaps in their resume? Somebody, anybody? Can you ask about gaps in a resume?
I don't think so, but I'm not sure.
All right. You can ask about gaps in a resume, but you shouldn't do it like I would probably do it. You shouldn't say, I see that, from 2006 to 2010, that I see a gap in your resume. You weren't in prison, were you? I always tell people, if there's a gap in your resume before they come, I'll assume that you were in the penitentiary. And so I need to know where you were. So when I work with students on interviewing and getting their resumes together, that's I don't care if you were a homemaker or if you were waiting tables at Denny's, I don't care. We need to know where you were from high school till now. I don't care how old you are. We need to know from high school till now where you were. Where you went to college, we need to know that. You don't have to tell us what years. But if there's a gap in the resume and we can't put it together where you were during that time, you can certainly ask that, because sometimes what people don't tell you is more important than what they tell you. And so age, gender, religion, family status, divorced, single, separated, sexual orientation, age. You can't ask those kinds of questions. You can ask about things that are or aren't on the resume. What other things are banned from asking? Can anybody think of anything else? What about, can you ask somebody why they left their last job? You can ask that.
I think that's actually on our application.
Right.
It comes that they do that.
Yeah.
They apply online. Yeah. I mean, I think it's on there.
Yeah, it is. You can ask why they left their last job.
Like, you wouldn't be able to ask a young woman if she's planning on having a kid soon.
No, there was a time when we did.
Right.
Um,
or how many children they're planning on having.
Right. You can't ask those family type questions. That is correct. Can you ask somebody if they're planning to move to the community? Who's the only person in the school district that's required to live in the community?
Superintendent.
That would be the superintendent. You cannot require somebody else to move to the area or, you know, into the district. You can't do that. You can't ask those kinds of things. What kind of things should you ask?
Where do you see yourself in 5 to 10 years?
At my age alive, I hope, you know, but yes, but here's the thing that I would implore you to, when you're asking questions of these people, when they come in, ask questions specifically about what you want them to do. Somewhere, I know it's old school, it may be too old. We have a lot newer stuff, but somewhere in your learning, I hope you came across the Getzell's GUBA model of social systems. I know it's been replaced by a much more popular and trendy Good to Great, where he talks about getting the right people and getting the right people in the right seats on the bus. That's actually the personification of the Getzell's GUBA social systems model for organizations that says what we have for you to do every day, the reason we hired you, has to be what you want to do every day. And to Kevin's point is, I would ask a question about the 5 to 10 years. Yes, that's a good question, but more specifically, what do you want to do with us? What do you want to do here? Why do you want this job? What is your passion? What do you want to do? You know, and so I've had teacher candidates come in, you know, I'm interviewing for a math job, and get a person in and say, I really want to coach. Well, see, I really want a math teacher first. You know, so those are the kinds of things, and you can say where you're going to be in 5 to 10 years, but at some point you really need to try to find out if what you have for this candidate to do every day. Now, I'll take myself 1,000,000 years ago. I wasn't asked, but if I'd have been asked, I'd have said, I want to teach chemistry and physics. I taught, you know, but unfortunately, what did I get to teach? I taught biology for idiots. You know, the repeaters back in the day when everybody, you know, at some point we decided every kid had to take biology. Well, you know, about half of them failed, and so I taught repeater biology. I was trained to teach chemistry and physics, but I ended up teaching repeater biology. Now, they should have known that I wasn't going to stay forever teaching repeater biology. You know, so, but they just need somebody to do that. It didn't matter to them because at that time jobs were so short. You know, it was a seller's market, and so you know, I just had to buy whatever they were selling. But today, people don't tend to do that anymore. If you hire somebody thinking they're going to do one thing and they do something else, you're probably not going to be happy, and they're not going to be happy. And so at some point in this interview, you know, it's not for some reason we think content interviews, do you know English? Do you know math? Do you know chemistry? Yeah, that's somewhat important, but the interview is more of, do we fit? Is there a goodness of fit? Is what you want to do every day what we need for you to do every day? You've got to find a way to kind of suss that out. Now, nobody expects somebody to come and stay 100 years, but if people are unhappy, they don't tend to do a very good job. And so at some point in this interview process, if you're hiring for an English position, don't lead them to believe it's going to be senior English when they're going to have to teach freshmen. They won't like that. Don't hire somebody that wants to work in primary grades and then stick them in an EOG course, 4th or 5th grade. They're not going to do very well, and you're going to be repeating the process pretty quickly here. So you need to find out what their passion is in this job. Kevin's right. Long term, we want to know what they're going to do in 5 to 10 years. where they see themselves, what they want to do, how they want to grow. I've had people come in when I ask them that, and they said, well, I'm just going to be here till I can get in law school or till, or something better, basically till something better comes along. Well, I'll give you that opportunity now. I'd rather have somebody less qualified that wants to be here, that has the desire, the want to. And so you've got to figure out why they're coming and interviewing for the job with you, what that is. Okay.
That makes me think of a story, and it's not a story, it's a true story. Story makes it sound like it's a issue, a situation. That we had a middle school teacher, and this was not her fault nor their fault, but it's exactly what you're saying. So she struggled for, young teacher. She was struggling. The kids were struggling. The administrators were struggling.
Everybody.
The coach at her school couldn't, had a hard time with her. And, they were like, go talk to her. So anyway, and she and I actually went to like a conference session during the day together. And after it was over, I was like, well, let's grab lunch. And I'm just talking to her. I was like, well, what's your background? Just tell me about yourself or whatever. She had done her student teaching like in second grade, and she had done a second student teaching in like fifth grade, but it was in like an Atlas, a gifted, and a much different school than where we were. But she was one of those that was like that certification, which could also do sixth grade. So she ended up in this sixth grade. She wasn't happy and they weren't happy. And I just went back and said, y'all, I just think she's in the wrong place.
Yes.
For her and for you. And, they didn't have, I said, move her down. I was like, put her in second grade. And they're like, second? I'm like, yes, that's where she wants to be. And of course, she didn't feel comfortable speaking up for herself either and moved on for not for some other reasons, not because of that. She had some later health issues, but, like years later. But, I just think, especially like when you're that young teacher and you're not in a place that's just matched up for, you're not in the right space. It's not good for anybody, you kids or the administration. It wasn't her fault and it wasn't their fault. And it wasn't that they weren't trying to give her support. And it wasn't that she was like not trying to take the support, so that just, I think that's really true. What we're talking about. It's really important.
Yeah. And what you're describing is is in the business schools what's known as the Abilene paradox. That's when you thought I wanted to go to Abilene in the summertime, and I thought you wanted to go, and we both ended up in Abilene, Texas in the summertime where nobody would want to go. But we didn't communicate what our needs were or what we wanted, and so we ended up in Abilene. Now, on a personal note, I ended up in El Paso one summer in Texas one summer, which is worse than Abilene if that's possible. But it is truly a thing in business school. They talk about lack of communication. I went because I thought you wanted to go, and you went because you thought I wanted to go. And like you're talking about, they didn't communicate their needs. And neither side was getting their needs met. And so that's very important in the hiring process to know what this person wants to do, what you need for them to do. And sometimes you don't always take maybe the best candidate because they want to supplant your senior English teacher first time out of the box. Well, that's not going to go well. But finding that goodness of fit in personnel may be the most important piece of that. Yvonne made a good point. Once you go through the interview process, you turn the name back into HR. They actually offer the job, but who actually does the hiring is the school board. They have to be voted on by them, and that kind of concludes the process. You get them in your district. If you're smart, you'll get them a mentor, and you'll unbalance your schedule so that if Lisa's the new teacher in EC, that we have her mentor, their schedule where their planning times aren't the same, so that they can watch one another teach during their planning times. That's probably the biggest mistake we make with beginning teachers. We find the close person geographically located in the building closest to them that teaches the same thing, and too many times they're both on planning at the same time, and they just sit and look at one another on planning when they should be watching one another work. And then you induct them into the business and get them started. So personnel is the heart of what you do. Don't ask inappropriate questions. I've got some questions that generally are asked for administrative, but also for teaching situations. Let me share that with you, and we will share. All right. Tell us about your educational background. Tell us about your work experience. Why do you want to be a teacher, administrator? What are your professional goals next 5 to 10 years, as Kevin said? Do you think, and then ask them some things about, their point of view, how to involve parents in education of their children. Generally, they've already done a demonstration lesson. I know that that's done a lot nowadays. They've already demonstrated their content knowledge and their ability to deliver a lesson. That's usually done at the central office level if it's done. We don't generally in schools as principals have teachers come in and teach a mock lesson. If we do, we do it in a group setting. That's usually, you're trying to find out who they are and what they want to do at your level. So does any of your districts have the teachers come in and do a mock lesson now? Is that a thing very much now?
I know for our AIG teachers, for them to get on the county list of approved AIG teachers for a principal, they have to meet with the facilitator for the gifted program, and they actually do a mock lesson for the board there to make that list. Yeah.
So generally, if you have those mock lessons, they're done for the content area people, either the constructional people or the coaches, facilitators at the central office level. That's where they're done. I don't know of any school district that's currently that the schools are doing content level lesson plan presentations. That's generally done at the district level. But so when you getting them in, you're not so much talking to them about mathematics as you're talking to them about what they believe about, does their belief system about school and schooling match up with yours? What they want to do is what you have for them to do. You're looking for a goodness of fit with your faculty. And again, I would encourage you, don't hire the same person over and over again. Try to be a little more diverse than that in your hiring. All right, anybody have any questions on the hiring practices? All right, let's talk briefly about compensation plans, employee assistance, those kinds of things. As an administrator, you need to know what your district offers. I would encourage you not to answer anything but the most rudimentary questions on that and refer them to that person at HR. That's kind of you don't want them going down to the central office and saying, well, Dale said that y'all ought to be paying me more. Don't enter into those kinds of discussions on compensation, national boards, those kinds of things, experience steps, bonuses, all that. That's not for you to know. And you get in trouble when saying those things. Now, employee assistance, know what your district offers, know what the rules are on that. I inherited a substance abuse addict that was hired knowing she was a substance abuse addict who was supposedly in recovery, but they went ahead and hired her for a special program. She relapses, me and her, I got to town the same time she relapsed. Problem was we had but that's the right thing to say. But the problem was we had an employee assistance in that district, and I couldn't, I just, I had to get a long-term sub, which didn't make the parents, the students, or anybody happy, me it included. But we had to, she had 6 months, and then when she came back, when we had to wait until she failed her second drug test before we could move on from her. And so it ended up, costing me a whole year in that position. You need to know those kinds of things. I couldn't have made a different decision because I didn't hire her. But knowing a district that had that, I wouldn't have hired her to start with. That might not be right, but that's just, I couldn't take that risk in a district where if she did relapse, you couldn't get rid of her in any reasonable amount of time. So you need to know what the rules are on employee assistance in your district, what they offer in terms of counseling or rehab or those kinds of things. You need to know what that is. And you need to do the rudiments of how your compensation works or your bonus system or local supplement, but refer all those questions to your HR people who handle that. Don't get involved with money. Now, I'm going to tell you, this is absolutely the truth. So I hired a young lady, and when you sign on and do your paperwork, they ask you if you want to be paid in 12 installments or 10 installments. And so when she got her first check, she came to me and said, they made a mistake on my check. I didn't get near as much as they said. And I said, did you get it in 10 or 12 installments? And she said, I got it, I got it in 12 installments. I said, well, you'll get less. She thought that you got the same every month, that you was just choosing to get 2 more months of pay. That's on me for hiring somebody that dumb. I know. I'll own that one. But other than that, but when she had a question, I said, now, you had your pay distributed equally over 12 so that you get paid this summer. And when you do that, there's a monthly reduction in your pay when you go from 12 to 10. Other than answering something as simple as that, don't get involved with that, whatever you do. All right, so let's shift gears now. Anybody have any questions on this week's assignment? All right, let's shift gears on personnel and talk about value added for a few minutes. So we've hired these people now. We've got them in our system, and we're going to have to evaluate them now. Everybody understands that may be the most important thing that you do as a principal after hiring. Number one, hiring those teachers. Number two is evaluating them, and in between, working with them to help them to grow as teachers. Your responsibility when you hire somebody is to make them successful. So now we're going to have to evaluate teachers. On what basis would you evaluate a teacher that you've hired? You would do the formal evaluation system, I'm guessing. What other things might you evaluate a teacher on? What about value added? What is value added? What is EVOS? We use it pretty extensively in North Carolina, but we also use a value added program in South Carolina. What is value added? Somebody, anybody?
It's a system that's used to determine the growth rate that you got from your students on EOCs, EOGs. Standardized
tests of any kind. We have a predictor score for that child of how many that they've got to get correct in terms of raw score. But 180 questions on the third grade EOG. How many do they have to get right to show a year's growth? And what we're looking for is 85% of the kids a teacher has to make growth, and 85% of the teachers in the building to make growth for the school to show growth. So how does that work? How does EVOS work? Who comes up with that magic number? So for Kevin to show a year's growth, he's got to get 150 out of 180. For me to show a year's growth, I've only got to get 100 right out of 180. Why? Who determined? How is it determined? And what are we trying to isolate in this algorithm? What are we trying to isolate here? What we're trying to do is determine how much value that teacher adds. That's really what the growth model is all about, is determining how much value a teacher adds. Should that be part of their evaluation system?
I would say yes and no, but the only reason why I say no is because I'm in a district that does not have an attendance policy, and I'm a biology teacher.
Uh-oh.
So when the kid that is supposed to make a level 4 and is predicted to be super high on their test doesn't come to school, or comes to school and sits in our suspension, which is really called the learning lab, so they're counted there, but they're not actually sitting in my class, and they've done nothing, and they failed my class, and then they bombed the EOC, it looks bad on me.
Yeah.
So that's why I would say no if they don't have an attendance policy, and we don't. The kid can just miss school.
You don't have a recovery either?
We do have a recovery, but so our kids were in Odyssey Ware last year, but it doesn't matter. They take biology with me first, and that their EOC scores count against me. And then when they go into credit recovery the next semester, next year, whenever, they don't take the EOC again, but their score still sticks with me.
Right. Right. I get it. All right. Anybody else idea on value added? Should it be a part of the teacher evaluation system?
Okay, so I'm EC, and I have some
I am too.
I'm very special. With my inclusion kids who are really resource students, I shouldn't call them kids because they're not gays, but my resource students who go to social studies and science for or any of the classes. I mean, they're just wanting them in there, you know, to get them exposed as much as they can by the 8th grade year, to see if they're able to go to, you know, general ed classes in high school, or whether they need to go to the OCS program, which has huge impacts on their lives, or their education, I guess I should say. And like, I mean, is it fair that some of these kids have behaviors and they completely shut down? Like, they won't even mark the first answer, or they'll go through and do the little Christmas trees. Or
Well, you know, for adults, fairest place you go in the fall of the year and ride the Ferris wheel and get a corn dog. So
and that's canceled this year, so we don't even get that.
Exactly. So we don't talk about. So the question is it equitable to count? But we don't count them. We don't count those. There's a different calculation for exceptional children. So in the value added, they don't figure into the normal equation. There's a separate system for them. We're not talking about EC kids. I should have been clear. Other than EC kids. So Alicia's brought up a good point. No, if we don't have an attendance policy. So there was a time when North Carolina, and nationally, 37 states use a value added as part of their teacher evaluation system. North Carolina at one time was going to get up to 50%. They've not gotten that far. The standard formative evaluation system using the McGrail document, teacher evaluation, still counts 75. You can count EVOS up to 25 now. But you're right, Alicia, if you don't have an attendance, that certainly hampers you on attendance. But there's some other things that factor into that we're going to talk about that would lead us to believe that we would know that a kid's not going to attend. And so what I'm going to show you now.
The bad thing is, like, so I do growth assessment parts with all of my students. So once in October, their EVOS data has dropped and I have their prediction scores. Right. I sit down and I can tell you every single one of my students what they're supposed to make. And then when I do their common formative assessments, I can tell you whether they've grown or they've gone backwards, right, what exactly we need to work on. I mean, I can tell you down to the pretty much last semester, I could tell you I was within a few points of knowing exactly how much growth I was getting on the EOC.
Right.
And I mean, I was right. But the year before that, I had that student who was predicted to be a 4. We have no attendance policy.
Right.
And I went from being in the blue to being in the green because of one student. She dropped 20 points.
Right. Yeah, that happens. Blue is, so you have 0 as your mean, and anything from 0 to 1.99 going to the right, I'm showing left on my screen, going to the right is, you know, the green zone is from 0 to 1.99 and from negative 1.99. So if you're less than that, if you're two or -2 or greater, you're in the red. You didn't meet. If you're +2 or greater, you're in the blue. That means you exceeded growth. So there is a confidence interval there of 2 standard deviations. Excuse me. I'm in class. I'll call you back. All right. Thank you. And so, so you have some leeway here, but I would argue that we could have a piece of teacher evaluation from EVOS, but more importantly, what EVOS will help us do is schedule our school. Who teaches what kind of kids and what courses best? That's probably more value than the evaluation system. We've got a pretty good evaluation, the McReal system of evaluation, where we go in and do walkthroughs and then do formative observations of teachers. That's a pretty good system. I don't have a problem using up to 25% of a teacher's evaluation on growth, but what it really is good for is, yes, a piece of it's evaluation, but it's also evaluative to know the teachers that we hired or that we have, who should be doing what. Back to that, what we were talking about when we hire people. Do we have them doing what they want to do or what they're good at? Well, that's what your master schedule is supposed to do, is we take these people, we make sure that we get the right people according to our master schedule, and we hire the right person that fits in that, but that not just that they're an English teacher, but they teach the courses that we need, and they want to work with that kind of course with that kind of kid. If we can be that intentional about our hiring, we can revolutionize our schools overnight. Let me say that again. If we can be that intentional about our hiring, that this is the niche that we have for this person, not just that they're a science or teacher, but that they're a biology teacher or a physics or a chemistry teacher, that we can plug them into our master schedule at exactly the right place. We can make this more of a science than an art, and I believe teaching is an art, but we can give ourselves the best chance to be successful as administrators. Goes back again, Yvonne started this tonight, how we go about hiring people. We got to know what's something, what we need, that master schedule, what's our allotment. But it can't just be, oh, I'll just get any English teacher. I need one specifically that work with this group or this grade level or this kind of kid. You don't many times get to replace teachers that often, especially in rural districts. I inherited a woman, when I got there, she'd been teaching, she was in her 42nd year when I got there at a rural school. And nobody there had taught less than 30 years, I don't think. But when you get the opportunity to hire, you need to be very intentional. You need to know your data. You need to know how EVOS works. You need to know what you need. Yes, you can use it to evaluate teachers and see who's adding value, but you also can use it to identify who you need to hire. And so let's walk through what value added is and how it controls for everything except for the teacher. And that's how we can tell how much value they add. So here it is. And I apologize before we start, I'll have to read through it here. Okay. Again, as I told you, You're looking for 85% of the teacher's kids to make growth, and 85 of all of your teachers to make growth as a school. So what happened? At 20 years, we took all the test score data from North Carolina, South Carolina, and we dumped it into a big database, and we did an analysis of variance. I know all of you know what that is. And we were looking to see how much variance in their standardized test scores, and that would be the independent variable, the dependent variable, can be attributed to these independent variables. And so basically what we're talking about is this. And so here are the variables that matter. Now, this is not, SAS is a private company. They don't publish this, and they wouldn't tell you this, but I can tell you from my research and data analysis, this is how much variance at each of these things. These are the variables, the variables that matter on the test score, and they are race, up to 30%, mother's education, father's income, teacher 10, district 5, school 5, grade 5, age 5, gender 5, previous test scores 5. So now that's not just, we didn't pick those numbers. We did an analysis of variance, and that's what they told us. So then we did a simple regression equation and put those together, but we did an algorithm. So you can see the only thing that can really could be impacted that you can change is the teacher. Also, don't retain kids. That hurts you. But other than that, the only thing that varies here is who you put in the classroom with them. So quality teachers can bring up to 10% of the variance in a kid's test score. And so you have to understand that. So here's how it goes. So we got third grade math, EOG has 180 questions. So the raw score that any student could achieve would be 180. The question is what score out of 180 would represent a year's growth? The regression equation is determine the score would be total percentage of dependent variables times the raw score. So here it is. This is an actual case. Tomorrow's third grade student in CMS, his dependent variables are, he's black, so he gets 20 out of 30. White would be 30 out of 30. Hispanic would be 15 out of 30. That's based on historical test scores for those three groups. Mother has less than a high school diploma. That's 5 out of 15. Beyond a 4-year degree would be 15. No father in home, 0 out of 15. Father's income in excess of 150 would be 15. That's mother's education, father's income. Who does lap time with kids? That would be mom. She can do more lap time if she's at home and not working, if dad's making enough money that she can stay at home. Teacher 10, CMS, high wealth district, low wealth would be 2. Kids at Villingsville, 0 is a takeover school. A high growth school would be 5. Grade 5, not a repeater. He was in the right grade, hadn't failed any grades. However, he was 9 years old. He was developmentally delayed, so he got 3 out of 5 points. Gender 5, because it was a math test. If it had been a reading test, he'd have got 4. Opposite's true for female. Previous scores 2 was not on grade level according to M-class data coming out of second grade. So his equation looks like this. 20 plus 5 plus 0 plus 10 plus 5 plus 0 plus 5 plus 3 plus 5 plus 2 equals 55%. So he's got to get 55% of the questions right on the third grade EOG math test to show a year's growth. We multiply 0.55 times 180 questions. He's got to get 99 right. If he gets 99 right, he makes a year's growth. The only thing that we don't control for is the teacher. We assume, and the algorithm is set up in such a way that if the teacher doesn't add at least 5 points, kid won't make growth. We can isolate how much value, and we can look and see what individual kids that this teacher is good with. And we can also look and see in a vacancy what kids that we're going to have this person work with. And we're looking for somebody who can work, who wants to work with that kind of kid. Now, that doesn't mean that they automatically will be good, but I can guarantee you if they don't want to work with them, they won't be good. You can't, if they tell you up front, I prefer this to that, then they're probably not going to do very well at that if you give them something they're not good at. So we need to understand the hiring process, how it works, the actual physical part of hiring, but the more important part is the intellectual piece, where we're more intentional. We're hiring people more diverse that don't look like everybody else we've ever hired, where we just hire the same person over and over again. We're looking for people who we can plug in to work with certain groups of kids that we know that gives us the best chance of success with those kids. We're putting those people we hire in an area that gives them the best chance for success as well. Thoughts on EVOS? What do you know? A lot of the things that you think you know about EVOS are simply wives' tale. You have it's because that every kid's score is unique to that kid. You have the same chance to make growth with every kid. The problem is not every teacher works equally well with all different kinds of kids. And that's what you're trying to do as the administrators, is to put the two together that match, a goodness of fit, getting the people in the right seats on the bus. Thoughts, questions?
Dr. Lamb.
Yes.
I was curious about the information piece about mother's education, father's education, and things like that.
Father's education is immaterial. It's his income.
But where do they, I know for me, I don't even have that information most of the time, even though it can be recorded in Power School. You know, where does that information come from? How did they get that?
That's on that is part of the that's part of what SAS can do is they pull that straight off tax returns. They pull that from those things. Also, when you register a kid in school, you have to answer all those questions. But they do pull some of that. But yes, school has access, or the state's database has access to everything that's on that list. Most of the time, the income is verified if they do free and reduced lunch. But for the wealthier kids, they don't do that. But everybody's got the state income tax on file, and it's hooked into this database. Remember, this is a state entity that's doing this. Although SAS subcontracts, but they subcontract to the state of North Carolina, and the group in South Carolina does as well. So all this information is available when that score is calculated. Now, that doesn't mean the classroom teacher is ever going to have access. Now, when you get to be principal in your Power School portal, you'll have all this information. Teachers don't have it. That's one of those things that you have to know what you don't know when you go and interview for a job, and I'll talk about that actually later tonight maybe, is that one of the things that kind of aggravates people when you go in and they want to talk about Power School, and a new assistant principal can talk about, I know all about Power School. Well, you know all about the teacher portal. The administrator portal is like 1,000 times more complex and a lot more modules. But yes, once you get your administrative credential, you'll get a login to EVOS. You can see all this stuff. The principal can see it all. You can also see all this stuff in Power School as well, previous test scores. You can see everything, but not from the teacher portal. No, you can't. But yes, we have it at our fingertips in the building.
And I know in South Carolina, and I'm sure it's probably something similar, but South Carolina ladies, so we have an early childhood data collection screen. Mm-hmm. So if you're in our SURDEP classes, they collect all that kind of information down to what kind of daycare you were, or low birth weight.
Absolutely.
Things like incarceration. Have you had somebody that's incarcerated? Have you had
absolutely
those kind of things? But it is on a screen. Teachers can't see it, so it's entered by the SASE clerk. But it is required information to be in those kind of programs. So.
That is correct. When you enroll a child in North or South Carolina, you have to give them all that information or they won't enroll you. So we have it all. It's just because of privacy, FERPA laws that we'll talk about next week. We don't release that to teachers. But yes, as an administrator, you have all that stuff at your fingertips. That's a good question. That'll be something that we'll talk about next week when we get to EC. All right, so Any questions on hiring? Any questions on EVOS? Being more intentional in your hires in terms of diversity, being more intentional of making sure that you match what you need for the teacher to do with what they want to do in the hiring, that you can really shape and mold, and you can revitalize, or you can reshape a school through those hires and being intentional in your hires. Any questions on those? All right, now I'm going to talk about interviewing. I see that I'm right on my time here. I'm going to be talking about interviewing for an administrative job. Now, all of you don't want an administrative job, but some of you want central office jobs in CNI, or want a job at another district in CNI. Many of these things are applicable, so I want to make sure that we go through this tonight. And so I have a tab down at the bottom. Let me share my screen. I can close that. It says interviewing materials down at the bottom, and that's what I'm going to spend some time on now. And so let me. All right, here we go. There are 4 types of interviews to become a school administrator. Your first one is they'll put you in an applicant pool. Kevin, have you gone through this process recently?
Yes.
All right, so in your larger districts, where they get a lot of applicants, they'll have an applicant pool. They'll do something like Strength Finder 2.0, where they try to assess your dispositional behaviors and temperament. Or they may do a reasoning activity with you, or they'll do a virtual with you, but they'll do something to kind of weed out the also-rans, the kind of the chaff from the wheat. And then the second level, you'll have a group interview with stakeholders. And then the third level, you'll interview with the principal themselves, or if it's like a curriculum job, you'll interview with the assistant superintendent for CNI. And then usually the fourth one will be either the superintendent or the area superintendent. So there are 4 distinct different types of interviews that you do. Understand that each one of them has a completely different purpose. You can't give the same answers to the same types of questions at each of the interviews. And so we'll go ahead and get started with this. All right, so that's kind of the last one. So the first level, if you do the Strength Finder interview, what they're going to ask you is questions. And again, I can't show you this because it's copyrighted. But I did do a year with Gallup and got my license to do a perceiver. But what they're trying to determine are your emotional intelligence, your soft skills, your work ethic, your positive attitude, communication skills, time management, and self-confidence. Those are the things that they're looking for. So they'll ask you questions like, Alicia, do you always come to work on time?
I'm always early, at
There
least
you
30
go.
minutes.
That's the correct answer. That's actually the correct answer, is I'm always early. Believe it or not, I was a principal of Early Start High School in Charlotte, and I was interviewing an AP candidate, and they said, I'm not really a morning person. And I was like, well, they ought to make you wear a helmet and a sign if you're that dumb. How'd you find this place? But seriously, the first thing that they're going to try to suss out is your work ethic. are you a hard worker? Do you work longer hours than other people? Are you always on time? Are you always punctual? Are you competitive? Do you want to win? Have you been successful in some other sort? They're going to try to determine what your work ethic is going to be. Are you the kind of person that we can trust to give the keys to? That's what you've got to convince them is that you won't do like Barney did. In the first season of Andy Griffith, Andy went to Raleigh and left Barney in charge. And what did Barney do as soon as Andy left? He gave Otis, he deputized the town drunk Otis, and he gave Gomer a gun. We're trying to figure out, what kind of person can we give you the keys to this place. We're not just hiring you as an AP, we're hiring you as a principal as well, because that's how it works. And they're going to be looking at your work ethic. That's the first thing. Do you have a positive attitude? Are you willing, gung-ho and ready to go every day? If you're sad and upset about having to be there, guess what the people will be that work around you? They're looking for a positive attitude. They're looking for somebody who wants to work with adults. So the question is, I think I might have asked this before. I asked it last week. One of the trick questions is, if it paid the same, would you rather teach kids or work with adults? And your answer better be, I'm excited about working with adults. Because if you tell them you want to work with kids, they'll let you keep on working with kids. They're looking for somebody who has a positive attitude, not just in general, but a positive attitude about working with adults, and understands that it's a different job than working with kids. So they're looking for somebody who's going to be positive in that, in terms of dispositional behaviors. Let me get this one. Communication skills. You will really be tested in the second round of interviews on your communication skills. But in the first round, we want to make sure that you can communicate with others through various media. So those things are important, that if somebody's having a problem, that you don't have a problem going down and asking them what the problem is and communicating with them face to face. Those kinds of things. They're going to be trying to determine your time management. One of the things that you have to realize, don't take a job that's too far from your house, or the traffic's too bad to get there. Just because you get the job it won't get any closer to your house, and the traffic won't magically disappear for you to get there. Your time management, can you get there on time? And when you're there, can you manage your time well? Unfortunately, I used to be the person that had to go out from central office and ask a principal, what were you doing that we weren't paying you for, that prevented you from doing what we were paying you for? You didn't get this done this month. Do we need to get you some help, or do we just get somebody new? Is it time for a new ox? If your ox is in the ditch every Sunday, then we need a new ox. If that's what's preventing you from getting it done or getting to church, is, my ox was in the ditch. Well, you can get your ox out of the ditch on Sunday, but if your ox is in the ditch every Sunday, if every month your PMR is late, your payroll, all the other things that have to go in on a regular, if it's late every month, we don't need you. So they're going to make sure you have a work ethic and you can manage your time. Now, everybody has a HIDE, H-I-D-E. And I can tell you what mine was as a high school principal, as an operations. I hid in the lunchroom or the gym, ball field, with vendors, things you don't want to do. Guess what, you people, where you hide when there's things that you don't want to do? Y'all tend to hide in the classroom. Say, well, I'm supposed to be in here. No, not all the time. You got a mad parent, or you got a teacher that you need to deal with. It's easier to go sit in the classroom and do observations or play with the kids. It's much easier to do that. But, that becomes a time management issue. So those are the kinds of things. And so we've kind of gotten away from doing the 60 question formal Gallup interview, Strength Finder interview, but you may still get that. But they're gonna ask you those kinds of questions. You know, are you always on time? Are you competitive? You know, what would you do for teachers having problems? You communicate. All of those kinds of things. They're going to be trying to figure out your dispositional soft skills if you do a Gallup in the first round. If you do an in-basket activity, a thinking or reasoning activity, I know Winston-Salem does this. Here's what that might look like. Let me go back and share my screen. This may be my favorite. So you can tell this one's got some age on it, because the new principal, he was I think he was 2 weeks late getting there, and he had 22 emails that it backed up. I get 22 emails before I get up in the morning. I get over 100 a day. So I'm sure that principals are the same way. But anyway, they give you some scenarios here of what you should do. If no other reason to pay attention during your school law class that you're in now, a lot of these have to do with laws, like the one where the reporter wants to come and number 2 here, to Dr. Brown, the newspaper would like to do a feature on you as the new principal, and I need to set up a time for interviewing you and some of your teachers and students. Please respond as soon as you receive the email and let me know a good time to come out. Tom Roberts, State Educational News. What's the correct response to Mr. Roberts? Read that item number 2 and tell me what the correct response to Mr. Roberts would be. The legal response.
I think ours would be that you have to contact the chief. We have a person who's in charge of media.
CIO,
I think you would have to
Chief
contact
Information
that person first, and
See,
then
I wouldn't even respond. I would just do what? I would just forward this email.
I'll ignore it.
That's correct.
Yeah.
And how many laws would you break if you did this?
All of them.
Well, the first one, yeah, there you go, all of them. First thing, you would violate the policy on talking to the media just to respond, right? That's a policy in your district. The first law you would break would be letting people come on campus that you haven't vetted. How do you know? Have you done a background check on this guy? Do we let people that we haven't done background checks, do we give them access to our campus? Absolutely not. What about interviewing kids? Is that against the law? Oh, that's a biggie. They'll put you in jail for that. So that's the kind of thing that, you know, these are the kinds of things that you've got to know, because they're going to ask you what you're going to do with each of these emails and tell them why. And all of them are pretty straightforward. One of them was, we worked through all these different ones, but here's the trick on this one. At the end, they ask you, you know, what are you going to do with all these and why? But they ask you to categorize these. And so look at these 4 quadrants. And yes, this is an IQ test. And if you fail this one, it won't matter. You notice it came up before what you would do with each one of them and why. There's a reason why. This is the landmine right here. Which of these quadrants, if you put any of those 22 in, do you fail the test automatically? Look at the 4 quadrants. And so there's one of these quadrants that if you put any, you got to physically write questions 1, 7, 9, 12, and 22 go in quadrant 1, and these are the ones that go in 2, and you know, this is, but they don't really care about 3 of these quadrants. One of them, if it has anything at all in it, you fail. They won't even bother to read what you're going to do with the emails. which of these quadrants is the choice you should not make. If you have any, if you are of average intelligence, which one of these is not a thing?
Quadrant
Not
4.
urgent, not important.
Number 3,
Oh.
urgent, not important. How can something be urgent if it's not important? You can have plenty of things that are not urgent and not important, like that spam email goes in that one. There is a spam email that goes in number 4. It's not urgent, it's not important. There's one in there that's urgent and important from the assistant superintendent that says, quit letting teachers take vacation days when kids are in the building. Is that urgent? You doggone right, that one's urgent. They're gonna start charging them. They're gonna fire you, and it's important. Why can't teachers take vacation days when kids are in the building? State law says they can't. You get annual leave days, what we generally call vacation days. You do understand that if you're a classroom teacher, you can't take one of those days when kids are in the building during a regular school day. There's an email in there from assistant superintendent that says, you're the new principal here. Teachers have been doing that. Is that urgent? You doggone right it is. Is it important? Yes, because what he's telling you is if they keep doing that, we're going to fire you. That may be why they fired the last principal. I can tell you, when I became a high school principal, I can tell you I succeeded a fellow who was fired because he was taking a state position and in the master schedule it was filling a federal teaching job. He took an English position and hired a photography teacher, which was CTE at the time. Well, it had been at one time. It wasn't even then. 6 years prior to that, photography had been removed from CTE to simply become an elective, and the district didn't fund it. So he used what he thought was secretly used an English teaching state paid position for that CTE federal program. You don't do that but once. And that's why I succeeded him as high school principal. Again, same kind of thing here. The school has, there's one in there that the assistant superintendent says they're taking vacation days while kids are in the building. That's more than likely why this position is open. So that one would be urgent and important. But nothing can be urgent but not important. There can't be urgency without importance. That's a commonsensical kind of thing. So if you put 2 or 3 in that box, when they got to that and if they saw anything in that box other than a smiley face, you fail. You're out. That's the way this one works. Now, if you pass this part, then they'll look at your reasoning to make sure you didn't violate the law on a couple of them, and you'll be fine. But you should, by the end of this course, I won't do it tonight, but by the end of this course, you should be able to work through these and not make any legal mistakes. And this is not very high-level stuff. And the other thing that they do now on this as well is they'll give you some of these scenarios live rather than this one was mostly done written. They put you in a room and you did it. Now they're doing some of this scenario lives on a virtual interview. So let's look at that right quick. So virtual interview questions. Now, again, the trick is they'll give you some of these things up front, and they'll kind of give you some clues sometimes about what they're going to ask, or maybe they'll give you a data set, or maybe they'll give you some scenarios. Now, you should never take your eyes off the screen. So what you do is I usually have a set with me, but I don't have them with me tonight. Anyway, get you some sticky notes and rotate them where the sticky part is so that you can do stickies all around the outside edge of your laptop, of your screen, and have them positioned around, little sticky notes with the answers on them to remind you. Because one of the things that happens is if you take your eyes off the screen, if you start doing this, trying to read your notes over here, see, I've got my pad right here. And if you see me doing this, what do they know you're doing? They know you're reading your notes. They want to make sure most important thing in a virtual interview is you got to sit and look. Now, here's the bad part for me. For me to look like I'm looking at you, I have to look at myself. That's just something you have to learn. If I look over here toward Kevin on the left, it looks like I'm reading something else. Part of what, really pains me is I have to look at myself for the whole time we're on, but that makes it look like I'm looking at you. And that's exactly what I'm doing in the periphery of my vision. But to make it look personal, you have to stare at yourself in the screen. Practice. Turn your camera on. Practice. Make sure that you can look around the edge of your screen at those notes without getting caught peeking at those when you're doing that. If they've given you some scenarios. But back to those, that's just a little tip. Put them around the outside edge. All right, back to here. All right. What makes you qualified? Intense pressure. What happened? They'll give you some scenarios here. But at some point in this interview, they're going to ask you this landmine question, and this is the legal question. If your district had a policy that you didn't agree with, you thought it was harming kids, would you enforce the policy or not? And what is the proper answer? You think it's going to hurt kids, this policy the district has? Are you going to enforce it or not? Mallory, I saw you wince. No good deed goes unpunished. You going to enforce it or not?
Well, all I will say is that we all, at some point, are going to have to go back to school, whether we feel like it's okay with kids or not. So technically, I guess we all are going to enforce a rule that we necessarily don't agree with.
If you're a school administrator, why'd they hire you? To carry out
To enforce
policy
the
and law.
rules.
That's
Yeah.
correct. If you tell them in an interview, the first level interview, that you're not going to enforce things that you don't agree with, they won't be able to get you off the air fast enough. They'll just reach down and pull the plug. Your job, nobody can give you permission to break the law. Your job is to follow law and policy, period. That's why there's always going to be some law questions in there. That one's going to be somewhere in this, either in the reasoning activity or the virtual interview. They're going to ask you a law question. Basically, are you going to follow the law or not? Just like, you're so excited about your first principalship or assistant principalship, that you invite a reporter onto campus and let them talk to kids. No, that's a law question. No, I'm not going to lose my head and do something that dumb. No, I'm not going to do something dumb and go against the district policy and not follow it out. I'm going to follow all the policies and laws because that's what you, in essence, hired me to do. If you tell people up front that you're not going to do what they hired you for, they're probably not going to hire you. Just a thought. And so make sure that you understand that in this first level, they're trying to determine, are you administrative material? Are you going to follow the rules or not? So in every one of these that we're talking about, I'm honest in that, your ethical concern that you're going to do what you're supposed to do. They'll give you scenarios. They will give you maybe there's a couple of scenarios in this one. They give you some data to analyze and give you a few minutes to look over it to see how well you think on your feet. And that data generally looks like this. Let me pull that up for you. Sometimes this is all they give you. Sometimes they give you this as part of the virtual interview. Let me pull it up right quick. They'll give you a data analysis performance task. It's basically what you did in the app cell. And that's one of the reasons why I know that you folks know how to do that, but that's one of the reasons why we have you do that again. In order to get a job, they're going to make you do the app cell. A lot of districts make you do that now, where they give you a standardized test score data. They make you analyze it and come up with an action plan to address it. They give you your demographics. They give you a little background, Title I, and then they'll give you all the things that you pulled, teacher turnover rate, and then they'll give you your test scores, and then they'll eventually ask you, once you go through all of this, they'll ask you to write a quick action plan. Who's going to do what, where, when, and why? Now, some districts now just give you this. Some give it to you like the CMS one that I just showed you as part of the virtual interview, and they give you 25 minutes during the interview. But they're going to have you analyze data, look at the school profile, analyze data, and then come up with a plan to address it instructionally. So that's what we're talking about here. So those are the 4 types of interviews that you can have that kind of separate the wheat from the chaff. Again, be careful of the landmine legal questions. Make sure that you're rational in your decision making. You all know that you can't have anything that's urgent, but it's not important. That's just a commonsensical kind of thing. So that's the first round. Now the second round of interviews is going to be the group interview. And all this is taking all the jargon that you've learned, worked so hard your entire career, and you spent all this money in a doctoral program to learn, and learn how not to use it with stakeholder groups that are lay people, that are civilians. That's the entirety of round 2. The group-led interviews. All right. So you can call out the answers here. Y'all are smart people. All right, so briefly describe what you perceive as your leadership style. If you ask me, and we're having this discussion, be really simple for me: transformational servant leader. How many parents or how many lay people, the fellow that works at the post office or the mayor, how many of them would know what a transformational servant leader is? None. Can't use your jargon on them, can you? So what you would do is you have to define it for them. And that's the definition of a transformational servant leader. Every question that you'll be asked in the group, you have to hesitate, or you have to suppress your desire to show them how smart you are with your acronyms and what you've learned. They don't know what EVOS is. They don't know what PBIS is. They don't know what DIBELS or M-Class is. They don't know, transformational leader. They don't know they don't know all the instructional terms that you know. You're going to have to break it down for them. But the one thing you make sure that you don't do more than anything else in this round is to say, well, EVOS, oh, you don't know what that means. So I set up for a district not too long ago. I set up their Principal of the Year program, and I set up the committee in the process, and it was actually on the first selection committee, and we had a lady who was actually an attorney in Charlotte and commuted every day about an hour and a half to Charlotte, and she was obviously about 9 months pregnant. That she looked just like a regular, housewife, and she is a regular housewife who happens to be an attorney in Charlotte, and she was on the committee. And we had this young man in, and unfortunately, he's EDLS graduate from Gardner Webb, local principal, sharp. But he came in and he had notes. He was reading notes when he was he had notes. You shouldn't have notes in an interview like that. But he would start his answer and then he'd say, oh, but you don't know what that is. And when he left, the lady attorney looked at me and said, how many times did he call us stupid? I said, I believe about 6 that I counted. That's what people perceive. And so you've got to break the answers down in the group interview for the audience that you've got, but don't say, oh, you won't know. You don't have to point that out. You just assume they don't, and then you break it down for them. Assessment drives and instruction. How would you help a new teacher begin to understand the data? Well, we would talk about the different types and we'd rattle off the names of that data. Well, you can't do that. Willingness to plan collaboratively, that's PLCs, but they don't know what that means. And so, again, as these questions get asked, she blames children for their performance and is frustrated by lack of effort. We would talk about EVOS versus, comparative accountability versus growth model accountability. But we can't talk about that, so we give them these kinds of things, that answers, rather than just giving them short inside the business kind of answers. And so you can work through this one gives you some, these are the kind of questions you'll be asked. These are the kind of answers you should be given that doesn't talk over the heads of anybody on the group. Remember, group interviews are generally stakeholders who are not professionals in the industry. And you have to speak at their level without sounding like you're talking down to them. All right, third level is the principal interview. That's when you get to show off and all your jargon and everything you know. The only problem is, let's see, and they'll ask you these kind of questions. All right, so the landmine question with the principal is this. You're using all your jargon, you're getting your money's worth of all this education that you've had, and you're hitting it off with this principal, and then you're talking about you went to Wilbur's barbecue, it's back open in Goldsboro, and you went and got you some barbecue. You and Kevin ran out to Wilbur's and got you some barbecue, and you're all excited, and you're talking about common things that, experiences, people and all that. And all of a sudden the principal slides you that land, hands you, that lit stick of dynamite. And that lit stick of dynamite is, Lisa, tell us about your strengths and weaknesses. What would you say your strengths and weaknesses are, potentially as a potential assistant principal here at Sunnyview Elementary School? What are your strengths and what are your weaknesses?
You want me to really answer?
Yes. Yeah. Don't sit there and look at that. Too many times people do that. Wait a minute. Yes.
I thought you were just asking and then you were gonna.
Lisa, you're interviewing right out the road here, Sunnyview Elementary School. It's right out the road here, and you want to be our brand spanking new elementary school AP. And you're interviewing with me. I've been principal here since right after Noah, right after they got all the water up. I've been here since then. And I'm looking for a new AP. Tell me what your strengths and weaknesses are.
I feel very put on the spot.
So you don't have to give me yours. I mean, tell me the kinds of things that you would say.
Just that probably one person would probably lean towards being very organized, very methodical, law following. If you're in a relaxed situation though, and they give you that landmine question, it might create this sense of this relaxed feeling, and
you share too much.
Yeah, it's going to
too much information. We do that very much nowadays on social media and other forms of media. We share way too much now, and we're kind of in the habit of that as a society, and they're dependent on that for you to feel very comfortable in sharing. And you probably, they've found some common ground. You talked about something. So here's the answer and this is how you avoid the landmine. You outline your strengths, and they're always dispositional. This is who I am. I'm not going to change. You can give me the keys. I'm not going to hire the town drunk and give Barney and give Gomer a gun. You know, I'm reliable. I'm honest. I'm ethical. I'm hardworking. I work at all those dispositional behaviors. Those are your strengths. Those won't change. I'm a fully formed adult. You don't have to worry about me showing up. Just like Alicia, I come early every day. All of those are your strengths. Now, what are your weaknesses? And this is where you really got to be careful. But your weaknesses should all be based on inexperience, things that you can fix. I've only seen Power School from the teacher portal. I've only worked in Power School from the teacher portal. My principal let me look into it, and I know what I don't know, and I'm going to go get trained on the discipline module in Power School right away. Or I know that that I need to be certified to do teacher observations in this district. I'm going to go get certified right away so I can hold up my end of the observations. Now, you know that every school every year has a number of formal observations that they have to do. And it's dependent upon the length of service of teachers, how many formals they have to have. Well, there's a total number. And so we take that number, let's say it's 400 in a high school. We've got 4 administrators. How many do they get each? It's not a trick question. 400, you got 4 administrators and 400 formal observations. How many did each one of them have to do this year? That would be 100. What happens if one of them is new and new AP and it's not certified? What happens to everybody else? They have to cover for you until you get certified. Those are your weaknesses, things that can be fixed with experience and that you're going to get on right away. They're based on your inexperience. I've never done this, but I'm going to go learn it, right? I'm going to go get trained. I'm going to go to the workshop, whatever. I'm going to have a fix for it. Whatever weakness I identify, I'm going to be able at the same time to tell how I'm going to fix that. My strengths are always dispositional. They're always who I am as a person, as a professional. They're not going to change. My weaknesses are things that are based on inexperience, and I already know how to fix them. They are going to change. You know, you don't say, well, you know, I drink too much. I sleep in, I'm not a morning person. No. I haven't done this, but I'm going to learn. I've only seen this from a limited perspective. I don't have a lot of experience doing that, but I know I can go here and there. I can get trained. I've not only got this, but it's based on inexperience, not on inability or incompetence. I just haven't had the opportunity, but I also have a remedy. And that's how you avoid that landmine question. That's how you go about doing that. So when Lisa gets put on the spot of saying, what's your strengths and weaknesses? Lisa would say, I'm dedicated, I'm loyal, I'm ethical, I'm hardworking. I communicate with parents, all the things that are me as a person. That's me, whether I'm working at, here or there. It's me as a person. And she says, I haven't, this would be my first administrative job. I don't have a lot of experience at this, but I can fix it by doing that. That's how you get around the landmine question. And they're always going to slip that one in. And then the 4th level of interview, we don't have to look at it. You can look at the materials. When you interview with the superintendent or the area superintendent, they're going to talk. They're not going to talk about how to make a master schedule with three lunch shifts. That's not what they're going to talk about. They're going to talk about big ticket, like 21st century skills, which are even more relevant than ever. Virtual, future ready students. What's it going to look like? How are we going to do it? I've got some things in there about how you implement these things. They won't just say, well, the answer is 21st century skills. Well, they'll ask you, well, how are you going to implement those? There's actually a document in your interview materials that says how to implement 21st century skills. And so if I work with people all the time on interviewing, and first thing I ask them, which level is this? What are we going to be doing? Who's going to be our audience? We're going to tailor our preparation to the audience that we're going to have. But there's some hard and fast things that you need to know as well. And so that leads me to Dale's top 10 for interviews. Dress for success. I don't care. If you wear a wig, wear your good wig. I told you I had an assistant principal candidate who came in and he was working at his school and he had on his work wig and it was kind of knocked on his head, kind of like kids wear their ball cap with the bill about 15 degrees off center. His wig was about 15 degrees off center. I don't know a thing that man said, but if you're coming to wear your good wig, you know, dress the part. I know that we tend to dress down nowadays. You know, I don't know that I've ever been in the school without a necktie or a coat. That's just who I am. You know, just like tonight, I don't know that I've ever done a Zoom without a collar on my shirt. I don't know why. But, you know, sometimes you just need to be old school. Dress for success. Research both the school administration and the school. Look at the state report card, TWC. Know the backgrounds of the administrative team, how you could fit in. Know when they talk to you that they give you a data set about the school. Be able to speak to what's going on at that school. Make them feel like you can fit in and be a part of their community. So I skipped number 2 because you folks don't have, but you can do some kind of a summary of the evidences that you've done in your programs, the 2 that you did. Don't make it more than 2 pages. And if somebody asks you what you did, you know, during your doctoral program or doing your clinical, you can kind of share with them the evidences that you did. The 6 that go in your portfolio, you know, we did this learning program, we did that, I learned how to redo a master schedule. Just do a quick summary of those things. They don't want to read them. Know what you don't know, and this goes back to the strengths and weaknesses question. EVOS, Power School, Power Source, RTI, PBIS, and Finance. Be able to speak to instruction in the bottom line, student achievement. But know what you don't know means they're going to ask you most of the time, again, what your weaknesses are. Know that you've seen these things and you know in theory what they are, and you've seen them from the teacher perspective, but you also need to know that from administrative perspective, they're much more complex than what you've seen previously as a teacher role. That Power Source, that's teacher observations. Power School's got multiple modules. You only see the teacher module. You don't see the discipline module, test scores, demographics. Understand what you do. You've only ever seen EVOS if you've seen it from the teacher portal. The principal's got a portal with everything in it. Know that you don't know all these pieces and parts, but that you can get them fixed pretty quickly. And speak to the bottom line, student achievement. Everything's about achievement. Have a humorous anecdote about how you were able to turn a negative into a positive. Always, that's a good thing to slip in there, a little story every now and then, because they're going to ask you that. That's that other thing that you're going to get asked with strengths and weaknesses is they're going to ask you, how a time when things went bad. I don't know that they ask that as much as they one time did. That's generally on the reference forms. Almost every reference form I get on you folks asked me about a time when you were faced with a negative situation. But some people still ask that one, but have a little story about how, something negative turned into a positive. You got lemons and made lemonade. Have your little story in your back pocket on that one. A little throwaway. It doesn't have to be long and involved. But make sure you've got one. Be prepared to discuss hours and responsibilities honestly. Again, it goes back to that work ethic. So I went to see Aquanetta at Hickory Grove. For those of you who don't know, Hickory Grove's on the east side of Charlotte, Mecklenburg County. It's one of the original 4 Smart Starts. They have a complete preschool, pre-K on their campus. When I say complete, about 1,000 kids. It's a separate school, and the elementary's got like 1,200 kids. Well, they share the same campus, different areas, and so they start the Smart Start on time, but the elementary is a late start elementary. They don't start till 9:30 because of the traffic, and they don't get out until 4:30. Teachers can't leave until 5 o'clock. So I go over to visit Aquanetta. I had a number of interns there. I was on my way to Fayetteville for class one summer, and I stopped by over there. It's not even this time of year. I mean, it's still September, and got the bulletin board out front as all elementary schools have. Welcome Miss So and so. And so I walked in and I said to Aquanetta, the principal, I said, I see you hired this lady. I said, oh yeah. I said, well, how's she doing? He said, well, I've already let her go. I said, I beg your pardon? She said, well, as soon as I hired her the first day on the job, she said she's going to have to leave at 4 o'clock every day because I had to go pick her kids up from daycare every day at 4 o'clock. She said, we don't even let the kids out till 4:30. She knew when she interviewed for the job that it was a late start school, that she'd have to stay till 5 o'clock every day or later. But she thought when she got the job that they would accommodate her rather than the other way around. As I said, the school won't get any closer. It won't change your daycare needs. It won't change the traffic situation just because you got the job. You need to be able to prepare to discuss those honestly. Know your strengths and weaknesses. We've already talked about that. You'll probably get asked that again in a general interview. Don't discuss salary, experience steps, or national board pay. Don't put the principal on, as I advised you as a principal, not to speak to those things. I'm advising you as an administrative candidate, don't ask those things. Because you'll put the principal on the spot and they don't want to have to answer those things because of the legal ramifications. That is decided at the state level generally what your base pay is going to be, not even and so the HR people have to figure that out. Don't engage in gossip or negative talk, even in big districts like Greensboro or Raleigh or Charlotte. We all know one another, and if you do that, the word will get around. And then finally, number 10, and my biggest pet peeve is don't interview for a job that you wouldn't take just to get the experience. It's not my job as principal to get you experience in the interview. It's my job to find the best person I can find for the job. I've had people come in and say, oh, I wouldn't want to work here. I just want to know what the questions are, so when I go to the good school, I can answer the questions. Well, then, I'm going to call that principal and tell them, or I'm going to put a hole where you can't be hired. You're wasting everybody's time. So if you know that school's too far, or the time doesn't fit, or you don't want to work with that kind of person, don't go interview for that. Don't waste that person's time. It's not their responsibility to get you interviewing practice or experience. If you show up, you're saying to that person interviewing, if I was offered this job, I would take it. That's what you're saying. And so make sure you don't just go interview and sign up and interview for every job that comes along just to try to get experience. That is not, that word will get out on that one as well. That's just rude and unprofessional. All right, so you all are going to get jobs, and we're in the home stretch here. I'm watching the time. So here are the things that you need to have done when you get your first AP job. Here's the things you need to have done by the first faculty meeting. Here they are. Know everybody's name and what they do. If you can't remember, then you need to write it down. Have them introduce themselves, proximity and eye contact, but know everybody and what they do. As soon as you get there, ask for an annual from the last year. Have them cross off the list people who are no longer there. Study the names and faces. Now, this will only be helpful if they put recent pictures in the yearbook. Hopefully, you don't have some of those pictures in there. The pictures are so old, The teacher's got a milk mustache and a scab on their booster shot. They were 12 when the picture was taken. But barring that, you should try to learn everybody's name and what they're doing by the first faculty meeting. I don't care how many you got. Now, I have eidetic memory, and so I could do it, and so people would come from far and wide to see how many I could do at one time. I did 220 at a large high school. Even if you have eidetic memory, it's not easy. But even if you don't have it, you need to work at it. The effort will impress people. It's the thought that counts here. Know people's names. Get an early win, present something positive to the staff. When I say get an early win, don't tackle something that's been an issue for 20 years at the school or something complex or expensive. I mean something simple, like getting the coffee machine moved from the lobby of the office over to the teacher's lounge. I mean, something, get a quick win. See, what happens is if you tackle big impossible things or you have several things that go bad right off the start as a new administrator, you get labeled as incompetent right off the bat. And even if you do things that work out later, you know, it was just luck. You know, even a blind hog finds an acorn every once in a while. You want to establish that you're a competent person right away. You need some early wins. Don't tackle the biggest issues right away. Little stuff. Give the staff a quick overview of who you are and your professional experience. Nobody wants to hear. They want to see. They're more interested in what you do, not what you say. So don't let it take you more than a few seconds to go through that. Volunteer for something nobody else wants to do. Do as I do. Lend a hand. Be a servant leader. Carry a notebook so you can write it down. And a lot of your early wins can be things like teachers say, I haven't had this or I need that. Carry your pen and your paper, write it down and get them those things. Get those early, easy wins. Lend a hand, be a servant. Do the things that help them. The little things become the big things. If you can get your principal to let you present the opening of the school plan and be conversant, probably not going to happen in the age of COVID because nobody really has a plan. But theoretically, if we had an opening of the school plan, if you could present that, because it makes you feel like you're already a part of the group rather than somebody new. Smile and laugh at the appropriate times. I know that sounds kind of dumb, but you'd be amazed at how many people don't understand that. Don't be so stiff and wooden that you don't smile and laugh at the appropriate times. Don't do it at inappropriate times, but be human. Ask questions and take notes so you can follow up on the request. Recognize something for someone for something you've seen. Be specific. Don't just say, well, I was by, Yvonne's room or Pam's room and looked good. No, I liked your bulletin board. I liked your display. I like this. I like that. Be specific about what you like, about what you're doing, so that it won't just seem like you're just, even though people realize you're just shining them on, don't be so obvious about it. And then again, don't complain or seem worried about the opening of school. School open, kids will come whether you're ready for them or not. So there's no need to worry about that. And then finally, and again, my pet peeve for administrators is don't tell them at the faculty meeting how busy you are or how hard you're working. That's the expectation for school administrators. That's why we hired you. You don't teach a soul. You're supposed to work hard and be busy. So the rest of us can do the actual work of the organization, which is teach kids. That's why we got you to do all this busy work and stuff that supports us, that gets us the things that we need. That's the whole notion of its school administration. In a nutshell, is you provide all the support and do all the dirty work so teachers can teach and kids can learn. That's the bottom line in our business. Yes, I don't know why folks think we go to administration so we do less or have boss people around. You need to approach school administration as a servant leader. You're there to do more, not do less. You're there to make teachers' lives easier. Yes, I'm hard on teachers and I'm quick on the draw, but I'm also want to be if you're doing a good job and tell me what you need. I get angry at teachers who don't show up and don't work hard, just like Alicia talks about her kids won't come to school, and I can tell she's frustrated about that, and she should be. You should be that same frustration with teachers that don't get any better, that don't come to work, that don't work at their craft, that don't ever do staff development, don't ever get any better at what they do. Kids deserve the best that you've got. Your job is to make sure that instruction is being delivered. That's what you're there for. And whatever you can do to facilitate that, that's the whole notion. That's the whole notion is student performance in the end. And being a servant leader, being transformational rather than transactional. We all know what transactional is: punishment, reward, being ugly and angry and grumpy. Transformational leaders inspire and motivate folks by pitching in and being pleasant. Even if it goes against your nature, that's the nature of the business. So we've covered interviewing. We've covered our personnel piece tonight. Y'all don't talk near enough. Y'all need to talk more. You don't make me have to call on you to talk more. Next week, I'm going to expect y'all to talk a lot more about exceptional children and your experiences dealing with them. So next week is exceptional children. And then the last three kind of go together. So as you can tell, we've got 4 sessions and 6 activities, but the bullying, harassment, discipline one comes together. And so we'll get there. And then our last 4 weeks are case studies. Remember, under course overview are your teams. This week or next, the first person that's listed as number 1 needs to get in touch with everybody else to make sure that on their team, to make sure that you get together and make sure you've read the case and read your chapters, but get together to do your PowerPoint. I would suggest maybe doing a Google Doc to work on it collaboratively, or you folks you can do that. You know what to do there. Looking at under course overview, again, here are your teams. You should be getting together to get started on this fairly quickly. Make sure that you do that. If you have questions or issues, let me know. And the thing that I came to look for is this: if you have not put your contact information under contact information for case study Zoom groups, you need to do that pretty quickly, so that people know how to contact you. That's under discussion board. Under discussion board number 1, if your information is not there, put it in so you can be contacted in the next few days. Anybody have anything for the good of the group? What have I missed? What did we not cover tonight? Did we spend too much time, too little time? I know we covered a lot of material, and we tried to move through it fairly quickly here. Big ideas here, folks. That there's reading that supports what we've done. I just try to hit the big ideas. Make sure you're reading in your principal book. And remember, there's reading that support each week. So this week, if you do your reading, I won't have to sit and read all that stuff to you, and we can be more conversational in what we do. That's just like this week, you were to read chapters 3 and 4 that went with this week. So again, I'm not going to sit and read the book to you. It's more conversational. Y'all need to start, more conversation with me, unless you just like to hear me drone on. But do not be afraid to speak up. There is no penalty for that. Trust me. I like that. We hadn't argued a bit yet. I'm just not having a good time till we start arguing a little bit.
I enjoy the stories and the giggles. I'm over here giggling, and she's like,
okay. Well, thank you for that. All right, our time is up. I appreciate it. I will see y'all again next week. Everybody have a good week. Call me if you need me. Good night.
All right, good night.
Thank you, Dr. Laws. I promise to talk more next week because that's my specialty area.
All right.
Oh, God.
You got to talk.